Hello. How's everybody doing? I'm just going to give it a few minutes since we just started letting folks in. I know I have a tendency to join Zoom meetings right at exactly the time that they start. So we'll give it a few minutes before we get started. I'm just going to give it another minute or two. Hopefully a couple people more will trickle in.
I know too, there's a member of PRSSA board that's coming at 6, so he's going to be here a little bit later.
Okay, great. Okay, well, we'll get started, and if more people trickle in as we get going, then they will trickle in. So hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this last minute program. If you don't know, my name is Rebecca Allard, and I serve as the VP of Administration for the PRSSA Sierra Nevada Chapter Board. And this is also my 3rd year serving as a professional advisor for the Bateman competition. And, you know, before we talk more about that and hear from this year's team and about their campaign, I just had a few housekeeping items. Later this evening, there will be an open dialogue, but until then, just be sure to keep yourself muted when you're not speaking. And you are welcome and encouraged to turn on your camera for the discussion portion. And just an FYI, tonight's meeting is being recorded. In addition, I hope that you have seen by now that Silver Spike Awards submissions are currently open. 2020 was many things, but one thing that remained clear to me throughout the whole year was that there are some incredible public relations professionals doing exceptional work in our community. The nomination deadline for individual awards has already passed, but the deadline for submitting your award-worthy work is on Monday, March 8th. And for more information about the categories, visit PRSSASierra.org. And if you have any questions about the awards process, you can feel free to contact me or any of your 2021 board members. So on to why we're really here. Hopefully you are already familiar with the Bateman competition. And if not, just know that it's PRSSA's national case study competition for public relations students, and it is rigorous. Teams across the country research, plan, implement, and evaluate a campaign, all for the same client. This year's client is the PRSA Foundation, and the brief tasked teams with developing campaigns that improve civility. As I said, this is my third year serving as professional advisor to the University of Nevada's Bateman team, alongside my friend and their faculty advisor, Allison Galden, and I'm consistently impressed with the thoughtfulness and quality of work of these students, as I hope you are too. Normally, we hear from the students after their campaign has concluded, but because PRSA National is positioning itself to convene a broad public dialogue about the corrosion of public discourse, we wanted to bring the students in during their campaign so that they could facilitate a candid discussion about public relations' role in civility. The team is going to give a brief presentation about their findings as well as their campaign, which is currently ongoing. And the remainder of tonight's event will be devoted to that dialogue, guided by these 5 impressive young students. So thank you again for being here, for your continued membership in PRSA Sierra Nevada. I'm sure you will enjoy tonight's program, and I hope you will share the benefits of your membership with a friend or 5. That's enough out of me, so I'm going to turn things over to Rachel Reyes, the team's account executive.
Hello. Okay, I'm going to be sharing my screen right now. Okay, so yeah, thank you so much, Becca, for that awesome introduction. I want to introduce myself. My name is Rachel Reyes. I am the account executive of the Radiate Respect campaign. I'm a senior at the journalism school, and I just want to thank you guys so much for joining us today. It is, we are just so appreciative, and we understand that this was sort of last minute, so for you to budget your time out to attend this means the absolute world and more. So we are the Back the Pack Bateman team. As Becca previously mentioned, the brief of this year's PRSA brief is improving civil discourse in American society and positioning PR practitioners in a way to do that. We have decided to tackle this topic by addressing cancel culture. For those of you that don't know what cancel culture is the trend of boycotting, the online trend of boycotting individuals or companies after possible wrongdoings are performed in an effort to cancel their careers or reputations. Cancel culture, I'm sorry, I got kind of sidetracked. Cancel culture has sort of been co-opted by certain political affiliations, and I want to be the first to tell you that we are in no way a politically driven campaign. Cancel culture and accountability culture have kind of been paired as one and the same, and we're also here to tell you that there is a vast difference in those two. We want to promote an accountability culture, and we absolutely believe that people should be held accountable for their actions after they do wrongdoings. But accountability culture does not equate to cancel culture. Cancel culture is extremely debilitating to civil discourse, as it doesn't allow for any sort of room for rehabilitation, growth, or education. It seeks to solely punish people and not cultivate any sort of conversation and teach people as to what they did was wrong. And so I'm just going to head on over and talk a little bit about how we narrowed down to cancel culture from having such a big topic. So Civility in America is a survey that is sent out by Weber Shandwick every single year. These statistics came from the 2019 study. 68% of Americans believe incivility is a major problem in the United States. 89% agree that incivility leads to cyberbullying. As I previously mentioned, this is mostly an online trend. And so what happens with canceled individuals is they are cyberbullied, they are harassed, and they are oftentimes doxxed. Doxing is slang warning for dropping documents. And so these documents can include anything from telephone numbers, personal addresses, even social security numbers. 56% of Gen Z believe social media is more negative than positive, and 57% believe social media contributes to the corrosion of civility. So I'm going to hand it off to Savannah, and she's going to be talking about our primary and our secondary research.
Hi, I'm Savannah. I'm Radiate Respect's creative director. So to narrow our age demographic for our primary audience, we found through a Politico survey that 18 to 35-year-old voters were the ones contributing the most to cancel culture. This survey polled a group of voters from multiple age demographics, and the results showed that 55% of cancel culture came from this specific age group. Additionally, 49% of these respondents believed that cancel culture has a negative effect on society. And this data helped to narrow our target audience as Generation Z. Additionally, we are situated in a town that is flooded with small businesses. According to the US Small Business Administration, 99.2% of businesses in Nevada are classified as small businesses. And then cancel culture is oftentimes targeted to businesses and individuals, which is why we made our secondary audience small business owners. After our initial research, we created 2 different surveys, one that was sent out to local Reno small businesses and one that was sent out to local community members and students using our personal social media platforms. Both surveys focused on the effects of cancel culture on civility in both the workplace and communal environments. And although it was difficult for us to reach a large audience in Reno's small business community, we did receive 25 responses from various business owners. And from these responses, we learned that almost 92% of them believe that cancel culture negatively impacts small business success. And then 87.5% of small business respondents also believe that reviewers on review platforms are uncivil or can be uncivil. And then in terms of our civil discourse climate survey that was sent to the general public, we found that out of 164 respondents, 81.6% said they have seen cancel culture take place on social media platforms, the most common one being Twitter. And from the same group, we found that 33% say they have participated in the act of canceling via social media. This idea of restricting one's ability to make up for their mistakes, especially after just one mistake has been made, became a really important aspect of our campaign. And then lastly, cancel culture also has a very negative effect on mental health. First, cancel culture can incite resentment and prevent the person from wanting to grow and learn from their mistakes. Excluding canceled individuals from society causes detrimental effects to that person's mental health, which can lead to an inflated risk of suicide. In some cases, the process of doxing, which as Rachel explained, is the releasing of personal information about canceled people on the internet without their permission, it can come along with canceling. And one study did find that doxing can lead to cyberbullying and harassment, preventing that individual from salvaging their lives or reputations.
Hello, everyone. My name is Emily Evans, and I am the social media manager for the team. Today, we just wanted to go over some of the methods that we are teaching in the classrooms and to small businesses for alternatives to canceling. These methods include calling out, calling in, and then we're all, of course, going to go over canceling as well. So with calling in, the main intention is to educate and help someone understand why their changed behavior is crucial for an inclusive environment. So the main intention of calling in is to find a mutual understanding and rethink behavior by using empathy. Typically, if the impact of someone's behavior does not match their intentions, they're unaware of this disconnection, and it is partially our job to help them be aware and hold them accountable. However, calling in is done in a private manner. So an example of this can be when a friend says an outdated slur without realizing that it is wrong. This is an opportunity for you to take them aside in a private space and let them know, hey, I just wanted you to know that this specific community doesn't identify with that word anymore, and I don't want you to go around saying it to the wrong person. On the other hand, calling out does not deliver the same amount of patience as calling in. With calling out, the behavior in question contributes to the oppression or discrimination of others, and there is a need to be stopped immediately to prevent further harm. Next slide, sorry. So an example of this can be when a friend is making fun of a specific ethnic group in front of your group of friends. This behavior might be really inappropriate, and so you might need to say, hey, please do not do or say this anymore. It's really rude and ignorant. So like I said, this might be a more public approach to letting someone know that their behavior is inappropriate.
So the final step is canceling. We want to ensure that people can first learn, understand, and grow from their mistakes. But if a person or a business was called out for the inappropriate behavior, such as discriminatory against one identity, despite being educated on their mistakes and continue to have pattern toxic behavior, cancellation may be permitted. The key difference when canceling is determining whether the individual or company was equipped with the knowledge to understand what they did was wrong. I'm so sorry. My name is Perry Horan, and I'm the project manager. I'm so sorry, that completely slipped my mind. So two examples of inappropriate cancellation are with Adam Smith and Jessica Schneider. Adam Smith and Jessica Schneider have actually collaborated with our campaign to shed light on the adverse effects of cancel culture. So in the case of Adam Smith, he was canceled back in 2012 for a video of him protesting against Chick-fil-A's anti-LGBTQ statements. This video not only cost him his job, he was forced to move to a different state, his family was harassed, and at one point he even contemplated suicide. He had 4 children in elementary school, and his children's elementary school address was leaked in chat rooms where people were showing up to the school to harass them. Similarly, Jessica Schneider, a local business owner's family, was also harassed, and she became a victim of doxing. We are featured in Rena's News and Review, where Jessica gave us a statement about her experience. Our biggest concern with both of these instances is that neither of the victims were given a chance to learn before they were attacked. We want to teach people to call in first and allow the person to be educated. In this clip, which came from an interview where Adam Smith discusses his experience from being canceled, he will talk about cancel culture and how it has morphed into a toxic and flawed desire for change.
That the cancel culture is canceling people so they can try to get those who are canceled, get their attention to change their behavior. I don't know if that's really a great assumption, because I think, again, it's where it's flawed is that we think punishing is going to bring about true, authentic change. I judge that I have authentically changed. And so I kind of am talking both sides of my mouth. I will say, I do give gratitude for the B team that happened to me. I think there are so much easier, more caring, compassionate ways for change, for wanting change and getting change from other people. I feel like I'm kind of an outlier. Most people will become even harder and more closed off and angrier of when they're canceled. So it's flawed because we think we're actually changing. Some people think they're actually changing the world and improving the world, and they are not improving the world when we punish the way I've seen our culture do.
While at the University of Nevada, Reno, we have created outreach events to communicate with college students. Currently, we are collaborating with Aaron Pina, who is running for ASU and Vice President, by partnering with his For the People campaign to educate university students about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in civil discourse. Today, we filmed a video with President Sandoval and the Dean of the Reynolds School of Journalism to create Civility Day to encourage effective communication with the techniques that promote civil dialogue. We are also talking to students face-to-face with multiple tabling events and classroom presentations. In this, we have been able to teach students and direct them to our civility resources.
Hi, so my name is Ali and I'm the publicity manager for our team. I'm just going to go over our second target audience, which is businesses, and I'm just going to talk briefly about what we've been doing and how we've been equipping them with resources regarding cancel culture. So as Savannah mentioned earlier, we live in Reno, which is a town largely made up with small businesses. And as Perry just went over, we actually had a business owner here that witnessed cancel culture firsthand. So we have partnered with 16 of these local businesses to provide them with toolkits, as well as have them distribute our stickers to their customers. We also gave each of them signs that read, "We have lost a lot this year. Let's not lose our respect for one another." We believe this can encourage a positive business-consumer relationship, and most of them have hung these in their storefront windows. In the toolkits that we've distributed, we have given prevention and intervention tips in order to prevent cancellation. Due to the small size of these businesses and lack of a big PR team to clean up damages on their behalf, some of them do not have the same ability to combat cancel culture as some larger businesses do, which is why it's really important to address the problems and the root that gets a business or a business owner canceled. Cancellation can also be taken to online review platforms such as Yelp, therefore spreading bad reviews and testimonials from people who may or may not have actually even visited the business themselves. For example, one of our partners, Mountain Music Parlor, the owner Renee was telling us about how during COVID, people were spreading false information about her business, and these people that were writing these negative reviews online were actually not even living in the state of Nevada and had never visited her business in person. So it can just really show that false information can spread quickly on the internet, as well as negative reviews. And then with businesses losing out financially, this can cause business closures. And as we touched on, businesses make up 99.2% of Nevada's business. So this can really negatively harm Nevada's economy. And then a few base points that we talk about and highlight in our toolkits to prevent cancellation are being mindful and speaking about political and social issues, addressing issues online, and ensuring diversity in your business. We want to remind business owners that they're not separate from their business, especially when with their online presence. And then just making sure there's policies in place against discriminatory actions is something that should definitely be in employee handbooks. We have embedded in the cancel culture prevention toolkits and employee education that highlights the 4 E's, which are ensure, educate, empower, and enrich. So ensure that the employees are fluent in effective communication skills, educated on awareness of their tone and delivery, empower the employees to solve problems, and it's really important for business owners to enrich employee understanding by providing various diversity trainings. We give information in there as well as on how to embrace change and accept criticisms when you're learning from your mistakes. We're teaching people how to say those sayings like, "Thank you so much for correcting me. I didn't realize that. I understand now where you're coming from." And then as Perry mentioned, we are partnering with Aaron Pina, the candidate for ASUN Vice President, and he has his own tab on our website in which we have a bunch of diversity resources listed for people on radiaterespect.com. And so we just understand that the road to anti-cancel culture is pro-diversity in any sort of environment, whether that be school, work, any aspect of our lives. We understand education is a big part of creating diverse and inclusive environments. But then if a business is in fact canceled, we have given them information on how they can go about trying to set the situation right. And then along with this, I just wanted to briefly touch on the exposure and the community support that we've gotten. So Reno social media actually shared our campaign to their own social media, which was great. This drove traffic to our social channels. We were mentioned in the Reno Gazette Journal in an article dealing with the topic of cancel culture. The Reynolds School has obviously been super supportive for us and been backing our campaign. And then their newsletter the other day actually mentioned us and talks about our campaign a little bit, as well as Civility Day that Perry talked about earlier. And then Frank Mullen of Reno News and Review was kind enough to write an article about our campaign where he discussed the partnerships with the businesses and our partnership with Jessica, where you can read her testimonial that she wrote just for him. And then next week, the Alice 96.5 show is going to be featuring us, so just keep an eye out for that. And I'm just going to hand it back over to Emily now to talk about our social.
Okay, hello again. So I'm just going to briefly go over our social media. Our social media has been a huge strategy in reaching our target audiences. So we are actually operating 3 social media platforms, which include Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. With Facebook, we are targeting small businesses mainly through that platform. With Instagram, we're mainly targeting Generation Z. And then with Twitter, mainly a mix. So we did count up our impressions so far. We have received about 57,180 impressions to this date. To the very far right, there is a little screenshot on Twitter, and we did receive about 35,000 impressions on just one tweet. So we got viral a little bit. I would first like to say thank you to the PRSSA Sierra Nevada board. They donated $350 for paid promotions towards our social media channels. And so therefore we have allocated $175 to go towards Facebook in hopes of targeting 22-year-olds to 55-year-olds in the Reno and Sparks community. And then we have also allocated $175 towards Instagram. We are posting 2 different posts in which we hope to reach Generation Z, so the ages of 14 to 24-year-olds, both in the Reno and Sparks community. So thank you to them. And then lastly, we are implementing a social media giveaway on our Instagram account in which participants are able to win $50 gift cards by participating in our giveaway. So all they really have to do is get involved with our social media and take our pledge online. And then we will be picking about 6 winners in the next 2 weeks.
And we just want to open it up to you guys for any questions that you may be having. Thank you so much for listening to our presentation, and we're happy to answer any of your questions.
Hi, I have a question. I think I missed the first couple of minutes. Can you go over your audiences?
Yes, absolutely. So, oh my goodness. Actually, this might be easier if I just go here. So these statistics came from a Politico survey. Within this survey, they surveyed a bunch of voters from multiple age demographics. And what they had found is 55% of cancel culture comes from 18 to 35-year-olds. And of those 55%, 49% believe it has a negative effect on society. So we have decided to make our primary audience Generation Z. And then we've decided to make our secondary audience small businesses, as they're oftentimes victims of cancel culture. And with us being situated in a town that thrives off of small businesses, we felt that it was extremely appropriate to make them an audience as well.
I think Sarah asked the question in the chat, but I'm going to ask one now that I know who the audiences are. I think it was probably like a couple of months ago on Twitter, there was a post that went viral from junkies. And from, I don't know if you saw that, but like from that, there was a lot of negative backlash towards junkies, a lot of people sharing their experiences about how they were appropriating culture and just very negative experiences from local people of color. So when you're talking about cancel culture, how is it that the people that have had negative experiences and others that have seen all of a sudden, don't want to go there, how can they call them in without asking people of color to educate and once again have to be the ones that forgive and forget and continue to support these businesses? What would you suggest that businesses should do for that?
That's such a great question. For those of you that don't know about what happened with Jessica, this was shortly after the riots that were happening in downtown over the summer. And so she had sent out a tweet that was criticizing rioters' outfits, and she was accused for fat shaming them, which was extremely inappropriate. And so to answer your question of calling people in and having that conversation, Jessica didn't have the opportunity to do that. And while she was absolutely at fault and should be held accountable for her actions, she was not put in a position where she was educated. If somebody wants to hop on, I'm sorry, could you repeat the second part of your question? I think I got confused.
Yeah, that was kind of what started off the canceling of junkies, but it was followed by a lot of people of color sharing their experiences of how she's displayed items and sold them and not really known that they were a part of a certain culture, and kind of mocked in a way that, you know, it was Halloweenish, and others being targeted because of the way they look, because of their skin tone. So how is it that you can call people in, like call her in, without asking people of color to educate someone, and be again put in that position where they have to educate someone not to do something or not to say something negative towards them?
And I think at some point, it is not a person of color's responsibility to do that. If a person makes repeated mistakes, they need to take it upon themselves to be educated and work towards becoming more resound in diversity and not being insensitive towards certain cultures. And so if anybody wants to pick up off of that.
I think the biggest thing is that when people were starting to call her out for that sort of a thing, the biggest thing shouldn't be like taking a step back and be like, oh, what can I do? It should be you take it upon yourself of, I can do better by doing this. And I remember when she first, with the fat shaming and all that stuff, when people called her out for that, her biggest thing, and I believe it was shown in the Reno News article, was she was like, I'm going to go 2 classes. I'm going to learn about this. I'm going to learn about that. And I think that was probably one of the biggest steps she could have taken, instead of asking the community, like, oh, like, what would you like me to do? She took it upon herself to do those. Does that answer your question all the way? Is there any way we can clarify anything?
Yeah, I don't think there's a specific answer. I think that was good. I think it depends, right, on the person.
I think so nice to see you, Lisbeth. To add to the, she's a survivor of Bateman, people. She's done this before. But part of why we're trying to teach students is not to just call out, that everyone has to be an ally, and call people in when we see something behalf of our communities of color, for those of us who are not of that community, because it's the onus is on us to help.
Right, because you don't have to have been Black or fat to have been offended by that, right? So I think, you know, that's part of accountability culture. You know, this is, I think we're entering the dialogue portion. So, you know, and it might get uncomfortable, guys, that's okay. But, you know, I think that it's the accountability on all of us to call it in when we see it, so that we're not placing that extra burden on any one marginalized community. You know, that's to me, that's a big piece of the accountability culture, is that I don't have to have been Black or fat to have been offended by that. I was offended by that. And yet I didn't call junkie in either.
And to Lisbeth's point, the ongoing thing, I can imagine. I've been to Junkie, and I know at Halloween, like, they will put together outfits that are culturally appropriating a variety of cultures. I've never said anything, but it occurs to me, you know, that's the kind of stuff that you just get used to and you just don't think about. And I don't need to leave it to my friends to advocate once again. This is why you can't use the Indian feathers for a headdress. You just stop it, right? Or whatever it is.
Good question, Lisbeth. So Sarah's question in the chat was, what did each of you personally learn in your experience putting this together?
So far, because we're not done.
So far, yeah.
I think that it was just a great experience for me to get like the hands-on approach. We were kind of discussing this in our meeting last week, but it's really different learning things in the classroom and doing exercises or writing up different things. Like for me, since I'm publicity, I had experience writing press releases in Allison's class, and she would give me feedback, but this is me actually taking what I've learned in writing those things and sending them to actual news outlets and the media and stuff like that. So I just think it's been a really good hands-on experience for me and learning real life, I guess you could say, things.
I have one. So for me, one thing that I really learned from this campaign in specific was it's okay to hear the answer no. There were a lot of times that I reached out to influencers or networking channels or just even just teachers and they told me no. And at first I really struggled with the no part, like why no? But I've actually learned to love a no now because no has taught me that I can improve and that there's room for growth. And so that's one thing that I've taken away for sure.
Go ahead, Savannah.
I was just going to agree with all of that. And also just outside of putting together the campaign, kind of like what our campaign is about, I've learned a lot about the different dimensions that communication has. And it's not just black and white. There's so much to it. And learning about the calling in, the calling out, the canceling, and the difference between all of it and when to use it, I think is really important. And I think it's something that everyone should learn about because it's so important and it's been great to dive into.
And kind of piggybacking off of that, I've learned that it is okay to tweak the messaging. I feel like in the beginning of the campaign, we weren't really nailing it and we were receiving a lot more backlash because, you know, it wasn't coming across clear enough that we do support an accountability culture. But now I feel really confident in our messaging and I'm really happy of the ways that it's evolved. And so it has absolutely been a learning experience that you really just can't learn in the classroom. I'm really, really grateful.
With like the involvement of everything, I think it just kind of came around to all the feedback we got, which was just absolutely incredible. Feedback from our mentors, from the community, from people that just reached out and said, hey, like send this to me and I'll talk to you and give you some suggestions. It's just been fantastic.
And the response from the students in the classrooms has been pretty significant in support. Yeah. Talk about that.
So go ahead.
I was just going to say, like with one of the businesses we partnered with, one of their managers there actually was one of the students in one of the classrooms that we presented to. So it was really cool to go in and she was like, oh my gosh, like Rachel, you came to my class and I loved your presentation. I learned so much and took so much away from it. So yeah, I just thought that was a cool experience. I don't know what you're going to say, Rachel, but.
Yeah, I just think that cancel culture has sort of become ubiquitous in the fact that everybody is seeing it on their social media. And, you know, it's just been a term that's been adopted by this generation. So effortlessly, and people will cancel anybody for anything, and they don't understand the gravity behind it. And so speaking to this audience was extremely impactful, and hearing their firsthand, their opinions on it was important. And we have, I think we talked about it a little bit before, but we have a pledge on our website, and we're close to 200, or we're a little bit over 200 pledges. And a lot of that came from the classrooms. And so, yeah, it's been a really cool experience.
So Rachel, I know you have a list of questions to keep the dialogue going, but I have a tough question for you, if you will entertain me. Or for the whole team. So I think you have already received some of this feedback on social media, and I'm just curious what the team's thoughts are on, an argument that cancel culture and accountability culture are the same.
Yeah, when me and Rachel visited one of the businesses, actually, we had like a 20-minute discussion with one of the managers about this, because he passionately felt that, they can be the same thing, and that cancel culture can get us further. And so what we were just trying to explain to him is that, like, the doxing and the attacks on their personal family and their personal lives and going to their addresses, that sort of a thing, I think that was the distinction that we were trying to make between accountability and holding someone accountable and making sure they learn from their mistakes, and then personally attacking someone, like finding out where they live, attacks on their family, that sort of a thing.
And like I had previously mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, cancel culture doesn't open up the discussion or the opportunity for any sort of dialogue. I think that with accountability culture, we should be holding people accountable, but also letting them speak back to us and hearing what they have to say in response. Whereas canceling someone, it's sort of just like shutting them away and pushing them to the outskirts of society. We want an accountability culture. We don't want a cancel culture.
Exactly. And I'm going to add to Rachel's thoughts. I think canceling is just, it's easier for someone. Like you did something wrong, you're canceled. And like Rachel said, it's pushing them out of society, and then society doesn't learn anything from it because they're just canceled, they're done. But holding people accountable, it helps both people. The person that's being held accountable can learn, and society can learn. This is how we talk through something. This is how we can everyone can learn from this experience. And I think people just think jumping to canceling is easier, and it's not that beneficial.
Cool. Rach, you want to pull up
sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
I have a follow-up question to that question, because I thought that was interesting. So a couple of days ago, I'm not in this campaign, but I obviously am a fan of cancel culture in a way that I see all these things happening. A couple of days ago, there was a picture and a screenshot of a UCLA track student, and it went viral on Twitter and just about anywhere else. And it was a screenshot where he was saying the N-word towards someone repeatedly. The screenshot and then his track photo, like, just spread all over Twitter. To the point where, UCLA took off their commenting on their social media, so no one could comment and tag him, and he immediately deactivated his Instagram page. And following, like 2-3 days after that, the coach came out with a statement, and he said, "We've known about this for weeks, and he was not participating, but we decided to give him a second chance. And now that it's resurfaced, we've realized that he's gonna be held accountable even more." So once you do that calling in, because that's exactly what that coach did, because he's Black, and put him on the side, he couldn't, participate, puts him back, this picture goes viral. How many times do you call someone in after an incident happens, or does it have to be just one incident, and then if they make that mistake again, they can be canceled after that? Or is there any, where's the line where you hold somebody accountable after repeated mistakes?
That's a great question. And I believe that there's a lot of nuances to it. So our big thing with canceling and when it is permitted is if a person has pattern toxic behavior, and we want to have that opportunity to have a call-in conversation in order for them to learn from their mistakes. And that is all about, it's all about an educational tool. And so, you know, if a person keeps on making the same mistakes, they probably deserve to be canceled. And they shouldn't be given those, you know, that second opportunity to rehabilitate themselves. So yeah, the actual like a number, it's really hard. But I guess it's just with pattern toxic behavior.
Rachel, I also want to add something to that. So while we're like looking for pattern toxic behavior, we're also looking for if they were equipped with the knowledge to know if like what they were doing was wrong. I think in some instances, people might make the same mistake multiple times, but have never been told once that what they were doing or saying was inappropriate or wrong. So I think a really big part of it is evaluating, like, did this person have the knowledge and the information to know that like their inappropriate actions or behavior was inappropriate?
Yeah,
Well, we can all probably agree at this day and age, people using the N-word know whether it's appropriate or not.
Yes.
Christina, do you have a question?
I do. Hi, everybody. I'm a UNR grad. You guys are doing a great job. Kudos. My question would be, how would you handle this if your team was brought in next week to advise a board of directors? Perhaps 2 or 3 of the people on the board were interjecting maybe political views, something that could be questionable. However, they're also fundraisers and representatives of the organization, but they are not paid. What would your counsel be in a crisis communication strategy session with the board in terms of how they put themselves out there socially? And where do you see a line in terms of volunteering, not-for-profit, fundraising, but enabling them to have their own opinion? I know that's a hard one, sorry.
That is a tough question. I was going to say anybody in the room who wants to chime in. You know, I mean, I serve on a board, and you know, that's tough. I mean, it's like you have to recognize that when you're a member of a board, you are representing that board, and yeah, I mean, there's so many variables, right? Like, is this board member somebody who donates a ton of money that you can't live without? Has this happened to you, Christina?
I live in crisis communications. Something has happened. You know, we've had a really tough 4 to 6 years in that arena. I mean, we had one executive director who's actually obviously a paid person, but wanting to go hold up highly inappropriate signs because they wanted to exercise their right to do that. However, it is very difficult to take a position left or right or somewhere in the middle when you're serving the community at large. And as you said, you're having substantial checks written where the people writing the checks feel like they're allowed to have an opinion, have a stake in the organization.
It's a challenge. When I worked at Planned Parenthood, we, you know, I don't think it's a controversial organization, but apparently some people do. And even if I, as a spokesperson, if I had we had several people who were of a different political persuasion than necessarily those that we as a political organization were supporting because of how it benefited our organization. And so we had to really struggle with staff who had one political belief, and Planned Parenthood really didn't want to pick sides. We wanted to be neutral, but the policy of the time, I've been gone for 7 or 8 years, really made that a challenge. And so part of that is the policies that you set up and the value statements that you set up. But I think a lot of people are not aware of what is racist. The language and meaning of racism has shifted. Gen Z are much more aggressive about appropriate behavior. That my generation as boomers, we didn't get to do that. I corrected myself today in a training that I did about, I don't even remember, but I caught myself mid-sentence about, oh, that's a racist way of putting that. Let me rethink that. It was about the, well, I won't go into what it's about. I caught myself in a racist statement, but I've worked really hard to do that. And not everybody is learning, like, well, what makes it racist? Why is Halloween appropriation of Indian garb for people who are non-Native Americans inappropriate? And so I think we need a bigger dialogue of training people about what the new definition of racism is, that it's not that you just don't like people. Because most people, I think, would agree that they think, well, it's everybody, but we haven't had these dialogues, which I think is the opportunity for this. I'm not saying, Christina, that your person is a racist or whatever, but I'm just trying to use a concrete example of most of us on this call are women. We've seen sexism. We've put up with sexism stuff for generations. I certainly have, and we're finally reaching the point where we're done with that. So the Bill Cosbys of the world are like, wait, what? what do you mean that's inappropriate? No, dude, it's always been inappropriate, but now we're done with you and the Harvey Weinsteins. So I think we're in an interesting time right now to, the Gen Zs and even the millennials are like, they're on top of it. They're paying attention. This is inappropriate. We can't treat people like this. And then the Gen X and the boomers and the silent generation are going, I have to learn new things about people.
Yep.
I'm not sure I'm prepared for that.
Exactly.
Rach, do you want to pull up your questions?
So yeah, we compiled some questions that can help facilitate our discussion. And so I wanted to start off and ask you to share some anecdotes from your experience as PR practitioners where cancel culture directly affected your clients. I know that we're all students, Ben and Robert, thank you guys for coming, are students, and so we would love to hear you share some of your own personal experiences.
And then Ben will get to your question.
Oh yeah, sure, that's fine. I mean, gosh, I'm trying to think of I'm experience where I've experienced cancel culture just as an individual. I mean, I would say the closest thing that I can think of is, I mean, just when we started, when we all started freshman year, that was when the Charlottesville riots happened, and the one
I was thinking about that too.
The student who was basically suddenly became the face of the riots was a UNR student, and there was just almost this layer of disdain over just being a UNR student. It completely changed the connotation. Suddenly every UNR student in the eyes of America was potentially a racist, and that was difficult. I also have family that are in Charlottesville, so that was a second layer that was difficult the first year that I was here. That's at least something that I can think of.
Yeah, I was thinking of that same example. Like, you know, even I wasn't a student back when that happened, but I remember watching a nationwide attempt at canceling UNR. Really. I'm glad I didn't work at UNR.
It was a struggle. Lisbeth, you were there over that period of time, yeah?
Yeah, I think the campaign that UNR did, the I'm the real Nevada, or I'm the real Nevada, and they had the T-shirts and everything. That was great. Like it seemed like it wasn't gonna be a hit, but everybody started feeling super empowered that that guy did not represent what UNR students were. So instead of, I mean, yeah, there was a lot of canceling, and I think he like lost his job, and like everybody was trying to be on the lookout. I don't know what we were gonna do if we saw him. It was just kind of like a thing, but having that kind of like bring back the feeling, you know, embracing your alma mater, it kind of changed everything. And I think I started to like see the good sides of UNR, and it's like, actually we have a lot of good things, and there's a lot of good students, and we do a lot of cool things. And I think that campaign really changed everything, because it definitely did amongst the students that I know.
Yeah, but it was painful for UNR. I mean, Tessa, I don't know what it was like in your department, but students were of color were like very impacted and didn't feel heard because they didn't feel safe on campus. And there are racist activities that have happened on campus, and the university is working to address that. But you don't just erase racism with the pencil. You just don't. And so we're still dealing with people wanting to be heard. And so this is a bigger dialogue than just one little board meeting.
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting what Adam Smith said in the clip that you guys shared in your presentation too, about how he did not allow being, you know, he was successfully canceled, right? Like, I mean, it went, you know, in the eyes of the people canceling him, that they succeeded. But what I thought was interesting was that he was condemning cancel culture while also saying it worked and it made me softer and it made me learn, you know, and not that that's equivalent to what happened at UNR after Charlottesville, but I'm drawing similarities anyway. I've never had a client get canceled, so
hopefully you don't ever. And to Elizabeth's point, you know, at some point, like the student at UNR is never going to change. That person is going to keep their notions and not change, whereas Adam is more than willing and has regrets about his approach, and had it been different, and if people had reached out to him differently. So we're not going to get everyone with this, but affecting people's livelihoods and their businesses is something we should be cognizant of. Is it really worth it? Or should we just share something just because I like Rachel and Rachel said it, or I like Emily and Emily forwarded this to me? We need to do our due diligence to see, is this true? And so on.
Ben, did you have a question? Somebody thought your hand was raised.
Oh, it was. Yeah, I did have one quick question. It's more about the campaign and less about the discussion. But I thought the inclusion of small businesses as an audience was brilliant. I would have never thought of that. And I'm wondering how your messaging changed between the two audiences, like individuals and students talking with just friends and family, with businesses talking with their employees and their customers and potentially other audiences. I was just wondering how that changed.
Thank you, Ben. So how our messaging shifted between the two audiences. So when we're speaking to Gen Z, we're wanting to teach them on like ways to handle dissatisfaction appropriately. And so teaching them how to, you know, address problems when they enter a business, where like with businesses, it's more of prevention and intervention and being mindful of the fact that you're not separate from your business. And so to be ensuring that you have inclusive language and sorry, I was onto something and then I lost it. Oh God, I love
It's
this.
normal.
Yeah. Yeah, and ways when what we had mentioned about Yelp, when someone comes to your business and is expressing dissatisfaction, to handle that appropriately. Yeah, if anybody wants to add to that, please.
Part of it is the brief is really looking at civility and PR's role in addressing that from a business lens, right? It's not just let's all be nice to each other. Let's just be civil. You really wanted to take this the next step and, well, let's tackle something that is causing incivility and is causing business impacts.
Okay, so did that answer your question, Ben? If anybody wanted to add, I didn't know if I heard anybody, but I could move on to the next question. If nobody had anything to add.
I was just gonna say maybe the thing you were thinking of was like the employee training and making sure that like in the handbooks and stuff there's like detailed language against discriminatory language and stuff like that. I don't know if that's what
Yeah, definitely.
you're talking about.
Yes. All right. So I think I learned. Just give me 1 second. Okay. So our second question is, do you believe that there is a decline in civility within civil discourse?
Rebecca, your face is all expressive.
I think I like subconsciously like amp up my expressions when I'm muted. Like I'm participating. But oh man, like Facebook has just made it so hard because it makes it really easy. You can just mute people, you know, like I don't and I think we saw a lot of that in, you know, the last election and the election before that, you know, when you realized you couldn't have a civil conversation with somebody, you just mute them or hide them, and like that person just doesn't exist anymore and they're out of my bubble. And you know, because so many people are just keyboard warriors, you know, I mean, people saying things on your Facebook that they would never say even in a private text conversation, you know.
Let alone at a party where everybody else was watching the conversation.
Right. Yeah. There's just such a disconnect. And I think, you know, in my personal life, it's like the bridge to civility doesn't even work anymore. You know, like there's so much distance between what I perceive as reality and what my loved one may perceive as reality, that like no amount of civility can bring us to I don't know, that's how it feels in my life. And that's why I got off Facebook.
And to add to that, so when we actually went and talked to Todd Feltz's class, he kind of shared a personal anecdote from his own experience just being on Facebook. And it was during President Biden's inauguration, and the way that a picture was making it out to be was that he wasn't wearing a mask, even though he was saying that all federal properties required a mask. And so the photo that somebody had taken of President Biden was it was in between like two pillars, and it didn't show that he was like social distance, and like it looked as if he was like in a pool of people just not wearing a mask. And so Todd responded to that photo and said, you know, that this looks wrong. It's giving off the wrong idea. And then, you know, people started to attack him, and he felt as if he was almost canceled. And so it's also knowing when it's worth it to even put in the fight of calling someone in, because at some point you're not going to win that fight. And especially with people that are so strong in their beliefs, you can only do so much, is what I'm trying to say. And it shouldn't, just because people have strong beliefs, and, you know, not every conversation is going to be civil. And as long as you are setting the stage and you've done as much as you could do, that's all that you can really owe it to yourself. So, yeah. Okay. So I can just head on over to the next question. Yeah. Okay. So how can PR professionals position themselves in a way where they can educate their clients in a civil manner?
Do you really think professionals are not civil when they're educating their clients, or are you thinking about how to help clients deal civilly?
The latter. I think.
Okay. Because when I read this, I'm like, I'm pretty sure they're professionals, so they'll be nice.
Yeah, this is a good one. You know, I mean, I don't have clients because I work for the state, but I just tell people, you know, it's my job to think about these things, and to think, you know, and to think about perception, and our job is perception, and perception is reality, you know. And, you know, I work in the public sector, so we don't, you know, I mean, we are in the public eye. Sorry, let me go back to how can PR professionals position themselves? Yeah, maybe somebody who has clients can speak more to this, but, you know, I just tell people that this is my job, you know, to make you think about how this could look, you know, if nothing else, how are you going to look if you speak this way? Go ahead, Christina.
Well, I was just going to say, this is such a important time for all of us to be mindful of our own personal reputation. So I think it starts at the heart in terms of reputation management. So we're not going to really persuade anyone to follow the lead or take this information in and utilize it unless we're walking the talk ourselves.
It's true.
So I think that the time is now for us to start right where we're sitting, right where we are, and then we build our reputation from there, and then we build trust, and we build civility. People will learn you're not going to engage. It may take a few times for them to learn that lesson, but you can drive the bus. You just have to be really careful and stay as we develop talking points, right? Even when you're tired, it's first thing in the morning, someone said something, you can't believe they said it. And then don't touch your phone, just put it down, walk back to those talking points, and remember who you are and how you're positioning yourself in the world.
Hashtag boundaries.
With a capital B.
Lots of deep breaths.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the things that we do with our clients is when we go through their immediate training, we kind of go into how they should, maybe not how they should act, but what they should consider when they're posting to like their personal social media pages. And that even though it is personal and, you know, freedom of speech and all that jazz, they always need to see that they're representing a certain organization that stands for something. An example, if you are in healthcare and you are anti-mask wearing, maybe not post about it, because when you go to work, you're going to be wearing one, and it could bring some discussions, and it could resurface online, and then you're going to be kind of like in a tough situation when, you know, you're helping patients, but you're attending rallies and you're anti-masking and putting somebody's health at risk. So kind of going over everything, kind of like what the consequences of that is. I think that's where a lot of the social media policies come in place with whoever their customers or their employees are.
That's a great example, Elizabeth.
Yeah, that's actually a really good example. I think that sometimes people don't really think through all the consequences before they go and do something and how that's going to affect them and reflect on where they work. So,
Well, and they often conflate free speech. Yeah, you can think and believe whatever you want because the government can't tell you that you can't say this or you can't do these things, mostly speech. But there are consequences, which is what we're talking about with accountability culture, right?
I recently saw this and someone was discussing it, and it was freedom of speech, not freedom of consequence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And I just think that social media, it's just, there's so much good and there's just so much bad that comes from it. And like, it's just, I think people just need to start being more aware of the gravity behind just one post, because it never goes away, but I'm preaching to the choir here. But anyways, okay, so I want to head over to our next question. How do you believe diversity, equity, and inclusion directly ties into cancel culture? I can just speak on behalf of the team that diversity, equity, and inclusion is the foundation to having an anti-cancel culture, because a lot of the times where people are canceled, it's because they're not being mindful of the ways that they're coming across to certain groups. And so being educated and mindful of these things, I mean, in a perfect world, we wouldn't have a cancel culture because people wouldn't say wrong things. But it's important to be educated. And that's why we think it's really important to have diversity, equity, and inclusion trainings at jobs or small businesses for their employees and for themselves.
But at some point, it goes beyond education. There are known national organizations who don't necessarily believe in diversity for all groups or equity for all groups. They might pick and choose their groups that they're okay with, whatever that means. And so that's our challenge, to provide that accountability as public relations practitioners, in whether we're going to work with groups like that and set our boundaries, that I'm not going to do your publicity or your employee engagement when you have those values.
Okay. So this is, I think, going to be our last question. But how do you believe civil discourse extends farther than just being simply polite in interactions?
Okay, real fast. With my family is that I have a very Republican family, and I do have some family members that are also very liberal and very Democrat. The biggest thing when we sit down and have family dinners is that my dad, who is very Republican, would sit down and sit across from my cousin, who is a lawyer in San Francisco. And the conversations they would have, and they talk about everything from politics and just keep going and just keep talking. But at the very end of it, they just look and they're like, we're both humans. We both want the same thing for our family. We both want to learn and grow, and we want to be able to protect our family. So even though we have different ideas of how we can do that, we both understand that that is the end goal. And that kind of just taught me growing up that no matter how much I disagree with someone, at the end of the day, we are both human. And at the end of the day, there is a 98% chance we have the exact same goals in life.
Kind of going off on that, when I see just being simply polite, in my mind I hear not listening. I think just it's such a simple and yet so complicated thing, where so civil discourse could extend so much farther if just people were just, if there was more openness and just more listening. And so yeah, like Perry, I can kind of relate to you a little bit. Like, I have a more conservative family than myself, and you know, I'm able to listen to my family and they're able to listen to me, and that's, I mean, that's the beginning, right? That's where moving forward starts, is just listening a little bit more.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. You know, most of us tend to, or I think it's human nature that we listen for how we're going to respond, not listen to understand. And, you know, in my life in general, if I'm not feeling heard, I usually take that as an internal flag that I also need to listen better, which is counterintuitive, right? Like, that kind of goes against our human nature. And that's a tough one. And also, when I think about politeness, my brain goes right to kind and nice are not the same. You know, being polite, being kind, or being nice, that's sort of like being, you know, just sit down and shut up almost, you know, just don't argue. And to me, being kind is sort of part of that call in culture, right? Like, if I'm talking to somebody that I happen to know doesn't want to say hurtful things, it is the kind thing to call them in. It would be the nice and polite thing to just keep my mouth shut and keep the peace. But I think we know by now that keeping the peace doesn't work. So listening to understand. That's all I got.
Yeah, I'm gonna add on to that, Becca. I think that's super important. I think the way that my mom's pretty progressive and she's learning, and I think that it's because of calling in and explaining in ways that she understands and giving her examples in ways she will understand. And that came with, it had to come with kindness, because if I was just being polite, she wouldn't know, and she wouldn't think the way she does today, if that makes any sense. I think that it's taken a lot of, it started with polite interactions, and then once I learned that that was not going to get us anywhere, it brought some tough conversations. But I could only do that by not being polite and kind of questioning her and her thoughts in a way that weren't totally offensive, but that brought her thinking. And maybe, you know, her staying quiet was, you know, I'm listening, and I get it, and maybe I don't understand all of it, but I will at some point.
That's awesome. That's great. I like all of your guys's. I'm like soaking this in like a sponge, because I think that all of this is so important. If anybody else has anything to add. If not, I just want to say thank you on behalf of the entire team for joining us for this discussion. Your input literally means the world and more to us. And so thank you so much for your time. And we're going to carry what you have said to us like forever. This is going to be a lifelong thing. And the road to becoming more inclusive, it's never going to end. So thank thank you again.
So Rachel, what's your call to action?
So
I bet you have some.
right. So we do have a website. It's at www.radiaterespect.com. We have our educational toolkits that we were talking about throughout the course of this presentation available on there for both consumers and for businesses. And so if you could go and check those out, that would be awesome. We also have a pledge that we would love for you to sign. If not, that is okay too. And we have our socials available at Radiate Respect. So the end of our campaign ends March 8th. So not this Monday, but next. So we would love your support until then.
Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you so much to the team for pulling together such a quick presentation for our membership. And I'm glad we were able to record it, so we'll be able to get this posted on our blog for those that couldn't make a 90-minute Zoom meeting with a couple of days notice. So I really appreciate you guys being here. I know the team appreciates it, and on behalf of the entire board, thank you for being here. I think that's it.
So nice to see everyone. Bye.
Nice to see you guys. Bye.
Hi, everybody. Great job.
Thank you.
You did it. I'm sorry there weren't more people here.
I'm glad. I'm physically shaking.
Yeah.
You guys did good. You guys did good.
When I talked, my face went bright red, and I'm like, please don't notice. Please don't notice. Please don't notice.
I didn't notice that it was screen share the whole time. So
Rachel.
yeah, I didn't notice.
Well, thank you for setting this up. So
Yeah,
much.
I'm sorry we didn't get more people there.
No, I thought it was great.
It was less pressure.
Yeah, and I when there's a smaller group, I think, stop the recording.